Hello everyone, Sidewin here. Today I'm going to be explaining the Deception skill in Pathfinder Second Edition. I am not using my model due to the amount of rules text I had to copy on a couple of slides, because I wanted the slides to be readable even on smaller devices. I'm going to go through this just like I've gone through the other skills, starting with actions, sorted into untrained and trained actions, and then go into the available feats for the skill. I have split out uncommon and rare feats to their own slides at the end due to certain limitations with them that primarily are related to adventure paths. So please be aware that that final slide might have some accidental spoilers. I've never played or run these adventure paths, so I don't necessarily know what they are. I'm going to start with untrained actions. With the Deception skill, you generally do not want to use these actions untrained, however, because the failure effects can get you in a lot more trouble than attempting to do it. Doing them untrained is an act of desperation, and generally, if you have an available skill slot and find yourself using these a lot, you likely want to get proficiency in the skill. So the first of these actions is Create a Diversion. This is an in-combat one-action ability. It has the mental trait because you're changing a creature's attention, basically distracting their mind. Additionally, depending on how you redirect their attention, there's an additional trait added. So you need to be aware of what methodology you're using depending on the creature. Because, for instance, if you're using a shout, it'll add the auditory trait, meaning that a creature which can't hear you wouldn't be affected by it. The way the action works is you roll a deception check versus the target's perception DC. This ability can target more than one creature at once, and it can also be used out of combat. The way it works is you roll the one check and then compare it versus each creature's individual DC. So, for instance, if you have a crowd of 5 people, and 3 of them have a DC 15, and the other 2 have DC 20, and you roll a 19, you persuade the 3 who have 15, but you fail versus the 2 that have 20. Additionally, this action becomes more difficult after you successfully do it once. Essentially, creatures have +4 versus any attempts that you try to do it again within a minute, because they're watching for you to do something again. On a success, you become hidden, essentially making it so that they're not noticing you, until the end of your turn, or if you take any action that is not a step, moving 5 feet or 1 square, or a stealth action, like trying to use hide or sneak. Additionally, if you strike a target, it is off guard as long as you were hidden towards it. Again, if you have the case of 5 creatures and you succeed versus 3, only the 3 that you succeeded against are off guard. However, once you strike a creature, it is then aware of you, because obviously you just stabbed them. On a failure, the creature knows that you tried to deceive it. And that's the primary failure condition of most deception actions, and primarily why I stated using it untrained is a bad idea. Because generally, creatures don't like being tricked. So if you just tried to lie to someone and they realized it, you're probably in more trouble than if you had never tried to lie, unless you would have been killed in that case. The second untrained deception action is Impersonate. It has 4 traits. Concentrate, meaning that you have to basically keep it up a little bit. Exploration, meaning that it can't be used in combat. Manipulate, meaning that you have to move items around. This can trigger certain counter abilities. And Secret, meaning that the GM rolls the check and the player doesn't actually know what they got. It's just how the effects happen that lets the player know what happened. So the way it works is the character impersonating someone takes 10 minutes to create a disguise. Usually you need a disguise kit, and if you don't have one, you usually create a worse disguise. The way that this works is either you're impersonating a specific creature, or you're just doing a general impersonation. Like if you're impersonating a guard in a large fortress, odds are that no creatures are going to be more likely to find you out. But if you're trying to impersonate, say, the Crown Prince, then it can change the DC. So generally, this action is more successful if you're impersonating a creature which you know well, or which you aren't really impersonating a specific person. Some GMs might require you to always choose one person. The disguise, if it provokes suspicion, causes a seek check from the opposing creature. The creature rolls versus your deception DC. The creatures who know the person are more likely to find you out. Like if you're impersonating someone's brother, it's very likely the GM will give them a large bonus to realizing you are not their brother. But if you're impersonating the one guy they've ran into like once 10 years ago, you have much better odds at not getting caught out. The success for this action is quite simply the creature believes you're whoever you're impersonating. The failure is that the creature can tell you're not the person you're impersonating, but they also don't know who you are, even if they know you. They just know you're lying. Which can still be problematic because obviously they know that you're not, say, Bob the Butcher, but they don't necessarily know that you're the guy on the wanted poster. A critical failure, however, the creature will know it's you. And if you're on wanted posters and whatnot, this is the point at which you can get in a good deal of trouble. There's only one trained action for the deception skill, but again, most of the actions are ideally only performed if you have proficiency. This action is feint. It is solely used in combat. The way it works is you roll deception versus your target's perception DC when you are within melee reach of the target. As this has the mental trait, it can only affect thinking creatures. The idea is that you're redirecting them so that you can then stab them. On a critical success, the target is off guard against you until the end of your next turn. A success, it's off guard to your next attack during the current turn. So generally, you don't want to use a feint as your final action of the turn, because it means that you'll only have an effect if you roll a critical success. And lastly, the critical failure for this action, and why you generally don't want to use it against creatures which are much higher proficiency than you, is that you become off guard to their attacks, making it more likely you take damage. This is especially dangerous versus creatures which are likely to be using this action against you, like assassins, because you basically gave them free sneak attack damage. At this point, I'm going to move on to the feats. I'm going to go through these level by level and then, again, split out the uncommon and rare. So the level 1 feats all require trained proficiency in deception. The first one is Charlatan, which lets you pretend to cast a spell when you're using a magic item. This is primarily useful for impersonating spellcasters, because, again, if you're supposed to be impersonating a spellcaster and you can't cast a spell, odds are that'll give them a higher chance of identifying you. However, the feat does not make it so that people can't find out what you're doing. An onlooker who recognizes the spell will know you used an item, but people who later identify the spell will still not know the effect was a magic item, even though they might know it was you who cast it. Or, more accurately, that you didn't cast it. The second feat is Charming Liar. Essentially, it lets you improve your relationship with creatures that you're lying to. It only works for significant lies, like if you're doing something trivial to try and game the feat, it doesn't work. For instance, if you're just chatting with someone and mention, oh, my sister just got a new internship at a magic school, then that's not necessarily a significant lie. If they've never met your sister, they don't care that you have a sister, and she's not really around. On the flip side, a significant lie would be something like, oh, your chancellor is totally trying to kill you. That's pretty significant if the chancellor is not actually trying to kill them. And obviously, you could still not be lying, but the point of it is you're using the lie action. Their attitude towards you will improve one step after this, but it's essentially just you can't game it. The third feat is Lengthy Diversion. Basically, when you use Creative Diversion, you remain hidden after the end of your turn. So you can do a more effective diversion. Like if you're trying to do a pickpocketing scheme, getting caught out pretty quick is bad unless you can run away. This will let you literally run. However, this amount of time is variable. It's usually at least like a full round. However, the GM determines it based off the situation. The last level 1 feat is Lie to Me. Basically, if someone's trying to lie to you, you can use your deception DC instead of your perception DC, if it's higher, to identify the lies. The idea, as the flavor text says, is you're planting little hints that make it hard for someone to lie to you without you catching them out. Like you're planting little missteps for them to make. The level 2 feats all require expert proficiency. One of them also requires a expert proficiency in a second skill. The first of them is Backup Disguise. Basically, you have a secret disguise underneath your current outfit. The feat text does note that you have to remove anything which will make it hard to take off your outfit in order to use this disguise. Like, for instance, if you're wearing full plate armor and your disguise isn't, then you do have to remove the full plate armor before you can change into it. The change typically occurs in 3 actions. Higher proficiencies reduce this amount. But this is the one time where, like, how quick it is to take off armor, how quick it is to remove equipment, etc. becomes important. And it's also why many characters might prefer a magic item that does this exact same thing. Additionally, this feat changes the impersonate activity. It makes it so that you can change your backup disguise using impersonate rather than just impersonating someone. However, you can also use impersonate to disguise yourself as someone that's not your backup disguise. The second level 2 feat is Confabulator. It makes it so that a target's ability to tell that you're lying to them or trying to trick them is worse than it would be by default. Basically, for both of those actions, if you fail to convince someone, or even if you succeed in the case of Creative Diversion, then they're more likely to catch you out the second time. This feat halves the bonus they get when you initially take it, and as you get higher proficiencies in deception, you get lower and lower penalties. Generally, with the scaling deception skill, this makes it so that the originally significant penalty becomes relatively minor. The third feat is Discreet Inquiry. It's not exclusive to deception, but it is one of the options for it. The way it works is that whenever you're gathering information, you can hide the true subject of your inquiry. The way this works is either you take additional time or roll a deception check in addition to your gather information check. The point of this is that someone trying to figure out what you were asking about has to succeed against your deception DC or the gather information DC. Typically, it's whichever one is higher to determine what you were asking about. So if you have the suspicion someone's trying to catch you out in something or otherwise cause you trouble, this is a good way to make it harder for them to do that. The fourth feat is Fleeing Diversion. The way this works is whenever you critically succeed on Creative Diversion versus at least 50% of your targets, you can immediately use your reaction to hide, sneak, or step. Basically, you get one more action, or potentially even 2 or 3, to get away from whatever you just did. It does require succeeding on 50% or more of the targets. So again, if you had 5 people, you can use this feat when you succeed versus 3 of them. But if you only succeed versus 2 of them, then you can't use it. This number can feel somewhat flexible, but it's basically just more than half. Half-Truths is a feat which also requires expert proficiency in diplomacy. So it's most likely viable, more so than for other characters, for someone who's very charisma-oriented and has all the charisma skills. What it lets you do is it lets you change the skill check for 2 actions, those being request and lie. Request is when you ask a creature to do something for you. Taking this feat lets you do it with deception, rather than always having to use diplomacy, as is by default. On the flip side, it also lets you lie using diplomacy. And it does change the failure condition of lying as well, because instead of outright stating a falsehood, you're just dancing around the point and twisting words, like you'll often hear politicians doing. The main purpose of this feat is as you scale in level, if you're only scaling one of these skills up to Master or Legendary, then it lets you take advantage of that for situations where you're using the less used one. Basically, for a character very invested in diplomacy, it lets them also lie to creatures, which the lie action is 90% of those types of uses. Because usually, if you're trying to trick someone in an RPG game, you're less likely to be doing the diversion look over there in a conversation, which is usually the point where a diplomacy character is. On the flip side, for a character very invested in deception, but with a little bit of diplomacy, this lets them ask for things when they otherwise would be less likely to be told yes. The final available level 2 skill feat is Quick Disguise. This lets you create a disguise using Impersonate in 1 minute. At higher levels, this reduces to 3 actions, and then finally 1 action at Legendary. The main purpose of this is you realize you have to disguise yourself really quick. However, it has more flexibility than backup disguise, although it takes more time. There are 2 level 7 skill feats for the deception skill, and these are the last ones which are common and not uncommon or rare. There are 2 of them here, and the first one is double speak. The way this works is basically you can speak using encrypted messages that only allies who've spent a good bit of time with you can understand. So you basically just make up your own coded language, and people who've been around you for a week or more know what you're saying. But outside observers think you're just saying something innocuous. If they succeed on a perception check versus your deception DC, they will know that there is a hidden meaning, but they won't know the meaning unless they critically succeed. The second skill feat at this level is Slippery Secrets. Basically, it lets you use deception to counter spells that read minds, detect lies, or reveal identity. The main purpose of this is if you're frequently using, say, illusion spells or dealing with spellcasters, it basically means that you're kind of immune to that magic. It does not affect mind control. However, it does make it so that it's harder to get information out of you. Basically, magic interrogation fails as long as you succeed on your deception saves. There are also 2 uncommon skill feats with deception. One of them is a first level skill feat called Secret Speech. It's uncommon because it's from an adventure path. The way it works is you learn how a certain secret society speaks. It's very similar to the double speak skill feat in that you again force observers to roll perception versus deception to tell that you are secretly sharing a message. On a critical success, they know the meaning and the recipient of your message. I suspect the primary reason that this is marked uncommon is because it functions incredibly similarly to doublespeak, which is a level 7 skill feat requiring master proficiency. However, the skill feat is important for that one adventure path. Many GMs would tell you you cannot take this unless there is a specific secret society, because very frequently when there is one, the party is all a member of it. Honestly, to me, it looks like a very good option for the situation in which free archetype is recommended, because it would give a shared system for the entire party. The second uncommon skill feat is So Rumor. It's a level 2 skill feat requiring expert proficiency. Its effect is a secret roll, and the time it takes is as long as gather information would. You roll deception, and on a critical success, you basically spread whatever rumor you did, and it's what those gathering information find. So if your rumor is fake, the person gathering information, when you critically succeed at sharing it, only finds out what you shared, rather than what might have happened. Additionally, this rumor persists for a full month, and you have +2 to deception, diplomacy, and intimidation, basically charisma checks, whenever you're using the rumor for intimidating someone or otherwise basically saying you're an expert. The success level of this is that the rumor spreads and it lasts a week, but it's only one among many rumors. So someone gathering information will learn your rumor, but it'll also learn the other ones. Additionally, you still have a +1 bonus whenever you invoke it. On a failure, there's no effect, your rumor just vanishes, and on a critical failure, everyone knows that somebody is spreading false rumors. And additionally, you kind of gain a reputation for it, and have a -4 to any future attempts in the same region. Finally, there is one rare skill feat, which is also from an adventure path, this one being Age of Ashes, and it's level 15. It requires Legendary and Deception. It's basically a advanced gaslighting feat, where you convince a creature that you played a role in their life, even if you didn't. In this case, you roll deception against the target's will DC, kind of similarly to if you were doing some sort of spell altering memories. On a success, the creature is frightened 2, and on a critical success, they're frightened free. Additionally, you gain information about the subject, as if you had attempted to recall knowledge against them. Basically, the assumption there is that the target will be sharing some secrets with you that they maybe shouldn't have. Lastly, the effect does not work against the same humanoid again until a full day has passed, and you've disguised yourself as a different person. Basically, to have it work, you have to look like someone who could have been in their life, but which they don't necessarily recognize. The feat does note that a GM can allow it to be used against non-humanoids, but only if they regularly talk to humanoids or you're able to disguise yourself as a non-humanoid. Convincingly so. So this feat is somewhat niche. A lot of GMs wouldn't necessarily choose to let you use it, even at the level you unlock it. But essentially, it does exist, and hopefully I didn't spoil the adventure path while explaining this. Thank you for watching.